And now we're ready. Okay, so now's the part that you've been waiting for. Today, we're going to be talking nursing homes. Denise Wells, the executive director of the Nursing Home Ombudsman Agency of the Bluegrass, is going to be talking about what she and her agency do. Wow, that's hard for me to say. I've always considered these folks to be the watchdogs, looking out for our loved ones who are in a long-term skilled care facility. And Kim Browning is going to be with us to talk about how she started a family council at one of the care facilities here in Lexington, where a family member resides. So take it away, Denise. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry, for having us, and thank you for attending. We really appreciate you coming, and like Terry said, I appreciate your questions. If you want to throw those into the chat, I'd be happy to answer them, or my contact information will be at the end. But as Terry noted, I'm Denise Wells. I'm with the Nursing Home Ombudsman Agency. We are a nonprofit agency in Lexington, Kentucky, but we serve all 17 counties of the Bluegrass Area Development District. And there is an ombudsman in every state in the United States. There's an ombudsman in Puerto Rico. So anywhere that you know somebody who lives in long-term care, there's an ombudsman program. So an ombudsman is a mouthful, but it is a Swedish word for advocate. And that's really what the ombudsman is. We're advocates for residents who live in long-term care. So in Kentucky, that's nursing homes, personal care homes, family care homes. And as of July 14th, that's also assisted living communities. And our services are provided, they're kind of outlined through the Older Americans Act. And our primary goals, our primary activities are investigating and resolving complaints on behalf of residents, providing information to residents and their families or staff of the long-term care facility, and advocating for systemic changes to improve resident quality of care. So back in the legislative session this year, when the bill was being written and passed to elevate assisted living communities to a licensed level of care, originally that bill had been written to specifically exclude ombudsman services. So one of the things that we did was we advocated that, of course, assisted living community residents needed to have access to the ombudsman. So those are just a couple of things, a few more things that we do. We want to make sure that residents have regular access to the program. So our nonprofit does a lot of individual donations and grant writing to be able to have part-time people out in the counties that we serve to go in and visit residents and really connect with them to be able to work with them on cases or to educate them of their rights. And then we also do, as Kim will share with you all, we do some technical support for resident or family councils. So she'll talk more about that. And then we work on, representing residents with governmental agencies, with, meetings, when there's meetings or legislation being discussed that would affect long-term care residents. We try to make sure that we're there to represent the resident interests. We are really, really unique in that we are 100% resident focused and resident driven. So that means we need consent before sharing information, which means that we are not mandated reporters when it comes to abuse in the long-term care system. When somebody's experiencing abuse, we want to empower them to make decisions about what actions they want taken. So they guide our actions. And when they're ready for us to report it, we help them report it, or we help them, if they're not ready, try to find a way to relieve themselves of that abuse. And all of the complaints that we investigate are with the goal of resident satisfaction. So I'll skip to these slides. There are other agencies that work in long-term care to kind of be watchdogs, so to speak. So we are our own niche, and our jurisdiction is the residents' needs or wants or desires. Whereas the Office of Inspector General is the licensing and regulatory agency in Kentucky. We are not licensing and regulatory inspectors. We know a lot about regulations and we might refer to relevant regulations, but we aren't tied to that. We can go above and beyond a regulation. And we can help residents file complaints with OIG. We don't provide direct care for residents. But we do provide training to staff. We do provide education to residents, and all kinds of education to the community as well, like meetings like these. And then we are not adult protective services. So adult protective services has a fairly tight scope. They are looking at abuse, neglect, exploitation through the lens of the state regulations. So they have to know that KRS, KAR language. They have to make sure that they're finding evidence to support an actual legal or criminal investigation. Whereas the ombudsman program, if somebody tells us that they have been spoken to in a way that violated their dignity, we can go ahead and investigate and seek a resolution without meeting that legal threshold of verbal abuse. So we investigate all kinds of complaints. We can investigate complaints as we walk in the door and we see things, like we walk in and there's an odor, or we notice that it's very, very hot or very, very cold. We can investigate that without resident consent because there's not an individual resident involved. But we can't share resident information without their consent. So we may investigate some complaints anonymously. When that happens, we might kind of interview some other residents to see if that's a shared issue across a hallway or across the whole facility to investigate and then seek a resolution. And then we call upon other people who are supposed to be, fulfilling a role in the long-term care system. We've long worked with adult protective services to make sure that complaints in long-term care are investigated and responded to. So, like I said, we do a lot of variety of complaints, and sometimes it's about the facility, sometimes it's about an outside agency, and we respond to the resident first. So if a family member calls us and says that they've got an issue with their mom's care, we would first seek to talk to that resident, so that we're not doing something that they don't want us done. And a lot of times families and the actual resident are on different pages about what they want investigated, what they don't want investigated. So it's always important to us to check with the resident. But the main focus of what we're going to talk about, or what I'm going to talk about today, is finding long-term care, finding a nursing home, getting good care. How do you pay for it? Those, really important questions when mom's in the hospital and she can't come home. So this booklet is on our website. It's free to anyone to download. You don't have to give us your email. You don't have to do anything. You can just go to our website, download it, flip through it. I'm going to review a lot of the information. So you'll get a primer, but there's a lot of really great information in there.
Hey, Denise, we
Yes.
have one quick question. Just want to get to that before you get really started. Does
Yes.
APS investigate in licensed facilities, or does just the ombudsman do that?
So Adult Protective Services does do investigations in licensed long-term care. They are the body that can, when they go and investigate and they find that a resident has been abused or neglected, they are the people who identify the individual responsible or individuals responsible, and then work with the police departments or the county attorney to press charges, to prosecute, all of that. They have a lot of hats. They do a lot of things. They are also somebody that you could call for somebody self-neglecting. A lot of people don't know of services. If you know that your neighbor is not really able to stay in their home safely, you're over there a lot to help them off the floor, or you've noticed that they're not taking care of their themselves or their environment, they do investigations like that. And then they can also help with guardianship assessments, which I will talk about a little bit later. And then there's a lot more information in the Green Book. We call this book the Green Book, about that. So I appreciate the question. Yes, they can investigate anywhere in Kentucky. Okay.
Thank you,
So,
Denise.
yeah, absolutely. Finding a nursing home. Google is misleading. If you go to Google and you type in nursing homes, Lexington, Kentucky, you are going to get a whole lot of stuff that isn't really what you're looking for. And it's kind of hard because as I went over the long-term care settings, there's nursing home, there's personal care home, there's assisted living, there's family care home. what are all of those? The Green Book has a chart in the back that talks about what those levels of care mean. It needs to be updated because assisted living is going through some regulatory changes, but we won't have those changes until the spring. So for right now, that's still accurate, but it will be changing. But on this search, all of these green arrows point to things that are not nursing homes. Magnolia Springs paid an ad to come up when somebody searches for nursing homes, but they're an assisted living. They're not even personal care. And assisted living right now, as the law is written, is a social model. It's not even a medical model. So that can really trip you up. So what I tell people is go to the Medicare website, because the Medicare, any nursing home that participates in Medicare, which is every nursing home in our 17 county area but one, all of them are inspected by the Office of Inspector General to ensure that they are following federal regulations. And then that information is uploaded to the Medicare website, where you can look at specific facility findings and complaints. So I'm going to go ahead and click to go to that that page so that I can show you, because it's kind of hard to, I could do a ton of screenshots, but it's so dynamic. You can click on almost anything. So it's really better to see it. So you should be seeing medicare.gov, find and compare nursing homes, hospitals, or other providers near you. So you can scroll down here and you can see Medicare has a lot of information about a lot of care providers. So I, in an interest of not getting anybody's family members' facility in this search so that you then worry or get distracted, I'm going to go to Glen Carbon, Illinois, which is where I used to work. I used to work at Meridian Village Care Center. So
Denise, oops.
yes.
Sorry, I'm sorry. And I don't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. Could you just go through those levels of care? What is the difference when you said Magnolia Spring is assisted care? What do they provide versus what does the personal care people divide versus then, of course, well, skilled care is the 24-hour nursing. But
Right.
you just let
Yeah.
people know, what those three distinctions are.
Absolutely. So assisted living as it is right now, like I said, is a social model. So they really aren't supposed to be providing medical care. What that means is that they can help remind somebody to take their medication, but they can't hand you a pill. They can remind you, they can help you kind of get it out of the cabinet or something like that, but you're responsible for that. You're responsible for being able to do most of your activities of daily living. That's like the big thing that you're looking at. If somebody needed some light assistance, like they just needed help with buttoning their shirt when they get dressed, they may be able to stay in an assisted living. If they can cook on their own, but they'd like to eat in a dining room with others, an assisted living might be a facility that they could go to. But the big point is that the staff there are not supposed to help you get in your wheelchair, get out of your wheelchair. They're not supposed to help you walk down a hallway. There are some ways that somebody who was experiencing a temporary medical issue could stay in their assisted living home with that level of assistance. But you're kind of looking at, you can be in an assisted living facility and you can get home health services. So that could be something that you might get in an assisted living, even though that facility can't provide that care. You could have somebody come to you. Basically, it's a landlord tenant type arrangement with some additional perks or things that they'll do for you. Whereas personal care is a medical model. So they're required to have Kentucky medication assistance to administrators to pass medications. And you still need to be what they call ambulatory in the regulation. You need to be able to move yourself. You don't have to be able to walk, but you have to be able to self-propel in a wheelchair or use a walker. You can require one person to help you out of bed or into your wheelchair, but if two people are needed to help you, that's a nursing home level of care. So in the Lexington area, Morning Point, those are personal care homes. Magnolia Springs, that's assisted living. And I don't have a whole breadth of knowledge for assisted living because I haven't historically covered that level of care. But it is something that, that will in the near future be able to provide medical services. But I don't have the ability to comment on that specifically. And then family care homes, that is somebody in their own private home who has become licensed to take care of up to 3 people who are not related to them, in exchange for a board and care kind of transaction. And so in a family care home, it's a lot like assisted living. It's more like assisted living than the nursing home. You need to be able to get up and get out of bed on your own. You need to be able to walk on your own, or ambulate. You can be in a wheelchair, but you need to be able to get in and out and move your wheelchair. And it's actually, family care homes are really kind of disappearing because essentially most family care home residents have been there a long time. And so they started out being on disability income. And so the family care home operator might only be getting $1,200 a month to provide care for somebody. And you're not really providing a lot of care, but you're providing meals and transportation and entertainment and all of that. So that's a short version of those 3 differences. If somebody were thinking, I don't think my mom or my dad or my spouse needs a nursing home, you could call and we could talk about, what those levels of care might be for you specifically. Okay. So in the Medicare website, you'll put in your location. It might ask you if it can track where you are. You can allow it to, and then it would auto-populate where you are, but you may not be looking for a nursing home where you physically are. You may be looking for a nursing home somewhere else. So you've got your location, your provider type. We talked about that. We're looking at nursing homes. And then if you know a facility and you just want to look up their rating, you can search that as well. And then, of course, they've got filters. You can do distance, overall rating. The star rating system is not, it's not foolproof, but you could say, I just want to look at 5-star facilities. You could look at the other specific individual ratings like the health inspections or the staffing or the quality measures. And we'll go through more of that information once we get into a specific facility. The number of beds, that's really important because a facility that only has 20 certified beds may be really hard to get into versus one that has 150. But then if there's 150, you may feel like you're lost in a facility. So, and then there are a few more filters. So like I said, I'm going to click on Meridian Village as an example. It tells you all of this kind of basic information, the basic rating information. The overall is 5 stars, but the health inspections did drop to 4. You can click on them and view those inspection reports. You can look at all of that information. And Medicare wants you to kind of have a baseline to be able to compare to. So they received 7 citations, whereas the national average is about 8, and the state average in Illinois is 11. And then you can scroll down, and they also do complaint investigations. So if somebody lived, like I was telling you, if somebody's in long-term care and they have a complaint that they think is a violation of a regulation, they can file that with the Office of Inspector General. They don't have any of those reports right now. They do have 2 complaints in the last 3 years that they were cited for. And then there's some infection control issues. Kentucky has been doing infection control inspections. So there are certainly infection control inspections on facilities in our state. But there's a lot of information, and then you can click this view full report, and I'm going to block. It downloads it as a PDF. So I'm not going to go through that specifically, but it is an option for you. Okay. So click out of there. Same with staffing, you can click and it will tell you information about how many residents and how much time per day their staff are around. So there's a study that was done in the early 2000s that shows that an average resident needs 4.1 hours of direct care per day, which is a lot harder to talk about than ratios, which is what a lot of states have kind of looked at. Kentucky does not have a minimum staffing law. They followed the federal regulation that there just has to be sufficient staffing to meet resident needs, which is really, really hard to define, really, really hard to cite. So we have in the past pushed for a 4.1 minimum for that, but I digress. So this is telling you how many hours or how many minutes an RN has to spend on each resident that she's there, or an LPN or a nurse aide, and the PT. If you're in a facility like Tanbark in town that's really focused on physical therapy, that number is going to be pretty high. RN, turnover, administrative turnover, all of this is really important. The national average is typically between 50 and 60%. It's gotten a little bit worse with the pandemic and the Great Resignation and everything. As everybody has found, we're kind of facing a staffing crisis everywhere. And then quality measures are also really, really important. But there's a lot, and they can be really kind of hard to read. So how many residents were there for a short stay? They were just there on Medicare, and then they were rehospitalized after they were admitted. 23%. That's not so great compared to, I mean, I guess it's average. How many had an outpatient ER visit, and how many were able to improve their function, how many got flu shots, how many got vaccines for pneumonia. All of these things, you might, if you were looking for someplace for your loved one to stay long-term, you'd want to come down and look at the long stay quality measures. And what I would recommend looking at is the pressure ulcers, the UTIs, infections, and like functionality. So how many residents had an increased need for their activities of daily living. Those are all things that you want to look at. And then incontinence is also really something to look at. Another thing that is really hot right now is what they call chemical restraints, which are medications that might cause a side effect of lethargy or sleepiness, and basically take somebody who might have been prone to trying to walk through doors that they were just wandering through. It might cause them to be bedbound, and it's illegal, but it does seem to continue to happen. So that's all really important information. And then you can go down here and you can look at some additional details. This COVID information is obviously new. Fire inspections, emergency preparedness. The emergency preparedness is pretty new. I don't know if you all remember a few years ago when Florida had a hurricane where a lot of residents died in a nursing home that was right across the street from a hospital because they failed to prepare for emergency backup generators and things like that. So the government passed some legislation that requires all nursing homes to have emergency preparedness plans for emergencies that are likely to happen in their area. So the nursing homes in Eastern Kentucky that were affected by the flooding were required to have emergency preparedness plans for flooding, or for fire, or for workplace violence. And so this would just share with you what those findings are. And then penalties, you can look and see, if a facility has a problem, they may be fined. If they have a problem that is really impacting resident care, quality of life, they can experience some other sanctions, like Medicare can say, okay, we're not going to pay you for new admissions. So then that nursing home says, well, we can't take any more Medicare patients or Medicare residents because we won't get paid for them until they fix whatever the issue was. So you can look into that. all of this little details. These were those filters, the other filters. And then I think this is very interesting to check out if you know somebody in long-term care, what kind of owner has this facility. And so Meridian Village is a nonprofit. It's owned by Lutheran Senior Services. And so you can look on here to see who are the directors, who's on the board for Lutheran Senior Services. And transparency is something that has been very lacking in long-term care that will hopefully continue to improve. And then, of course, the location, but something really helpful to know, you can expand this, it will refresh, and then you don't, I know some people really like having a printed document to be able to sit side by side with your family and look at these things. So you can do that by clicking that expand. There would still be places where you could click the link to read more about something, but it's a really nice detail. The old Medicare website, or Medicare Compare website was really clunky. You can compare, the whole idea of the name being compare. You can compare, let's go back to our map. Up to 3 nursing homes, and it will do a side-by-side comparison. So let's say your loved one is in a hospital and they've been told, okay, we're going to discharge you to a rehab facility. You know, these are the places that we're looking at. You can go on here and you can compare them. Most of this is that abbreviated information, but you can still look at all of this stuff side by side, which is really, really nice. Okay, so that is really what I have for the Medicare website. If you have questions about the website, you can certainly give me a call. I've been on the phone with somebody and kind of walked them through going to this website. So you can certainly call us and we can try to help you with that as well.
Denise, there's a question.
Yes.
Is it true that the personal level of care is going away at the first of the year?
Essentially no. What we may see is that the personal care home regulations may also be revised, but there's no plan to do away with that level of care in the first of the year. So ideally it will stay there. They have kind of laid some groundwork to change that language. Assisted living and personal care in a lot of other states, they're the same thing. Mm-hmm. So it may be that assisted living will be renamed, or personal care will be renamed to be assisted living, but that's not anywhere in the immediate near future. And it's something that we would certainly communicate with our email followers or our social media followers about. So you can sign up for our email if you visit our website, www.ombuddy.org, or find us on Facebook. So that is a good question, and it's one that I think a lot of people are a little bit anxious about this change. So I expect we'll have some more questions, and I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Denise, another one is, what about services like a place for mom? Are they helpful? And then could you explain the payment? Because it's free to people, but somebody's got to get paid somewhere.
Yeah, so a place for mom, I kind of think of that as, this is kind of a strange comparison, but a few years ago when I got married, there's a woman in town who is a free wedding planner. But the thing is, you have to pick at least, one vendor, one of her preferred vendors, because I imagine there's a referral bonus for her to say, okay, well, I found this bride and she hired this photographer, so this photographer is going to pay me. So similar setups for a place for mom. I don't think that a place for mom limits you to those facilities, but they may focus you on certain facilities. So I think that it can be useful. I wouldn't say that you shouldn't use them, but you can also call us and we can talk to you about different facilities. They can also be kind of, I think if you work full-time and you're really absolutely unavailable during normal business hours to talk with nursing home administrative staff or admission staff, that can be valuable, because they can help you with referrals, and I'll go through what those referrals are. But yeah, if it's free to you, it means that somebody else is paying. It's kind of like Facebook. It's free to us because people are paying to target ads at you based on all the information that you've given Facebook. So yes, not that it's a bad service. It's just something to be thoughtful of, I think, is that you want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence behind what they're recommending.
Right. I can share a personal story about that. I'd always heard about this. And then when we were looking for a care facility for my dad up in Wisconsin, I thought, I don't know, why not try it, see what happens. And we got the name of 3 facilities. All were probably 15 to 20 miles away. There were none in the area right around us. There's one very good facility not too far from us. There's another good facility almost across the street from where he was. So yeah, like Denise said, you got to be just a little wary of it.
Yeah. Okay. So the rest of these slides really kind of go through some of the information in that green book. So I won't harp on them, but I want to make sure that you know what's in there so that you can look at it later. Selecting a nursing home is really hard. I imagine that most people, my grandmother's been in a nursing home, my husband's parents, well, my husband's father was in a nursing home for a little while. It is really difficult to make a decision about where you're going to send that person, that loved one. So we have just some suggested questions, things to think about when you're looking into those long-term care facilities that are kind of above and beyond the 5-star rating. Because as I tell people, Meridian Village on that website, that was a 5-star facility. But when I was there, I wasn't a nurse. I worked the reception desk. It was my college job. But when I was there, a nurse aide was pushing a woman in a wheelchair, and the blanket that the resident had on her lap got caught in the wheel and pulled her leg and fractured her femur. So 5-star facilities still have things that happen. 1-star facilities still have people who really care. And so nothing beats going in and visiting a facility to make sure that what you see on the Medicare website matches what you see when you're in the building. And so I will typically tell somebody that location is really one of the most important things, because being able to visit is one of the best predictors of quality of care. If you're in the building every day or once a week, or however often you're able to go, that's gonna be really good for your loved one, because they know somebody's coming in to see them, and they know that somebody's gonna be walking down the hall and all of that. And then, personal preferences, of course. Staff, when you go to visit, are you hearing kind voices? Are you hearing no voices? Are you hearing loud? And we really advocate that this nursing home is somebody's home. So I wouldn't go into somebody's home or in their yard or and yell or play music very loudly. So keep an eye on those things. And then mealtime, where do they eat? How's the food look? Activities, they're required to post their activities calendar. So check that out, see if there's something that you think your loved one would enjoy. And then what other services do they provide? And it's kind of hard, especially with COVID, but even before, a helpful service that a facility has may not always be there. So just know that we worked cases where a facility decides that they're no longer going to provide transportation services. So that's a huge change for somebody who might have picked that facility specifically because they have their own van and they're able to take people to doctor's appointments. Okay, I've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to try to be quick, but please feel free to continue to ask questions. We just may not make it to the last of my slides, but that's okay. So the next few slides are all about getting into a nursing home. And so you could go to a nursing home from your home, from the hospital, or from another long-term care facility. And so we recommend that you be as involved as you can be in making that decision. If your loved one's in a hospital, there's a social worker that has a lot of pressure on them to get your loved one into a nursing home. So it's really helpful to work with them, kind of give them a list of facilities that you want them to send referrals to. If you're at home, get that list and then make an appointment with the loved one's primary care doctor and ask the doctor to make a referral. And there are doctor's offices should have somebody that can help send a referral, but if they don't, then you can ask for a copy of the referral. You can make those referrals yourself. Social workers at hospitals absolutely have to do that. That's what they're getting paid for by Medicare. And then after a referral's been sent, you can call the nursing home, you can ask to speak to the admissions coordinator, and you can kind of politely ask if there are any bed availability, or if you may, if they see that there could be something opening up in the near future. But I really warn people against talking about their loved one's care in anything other than the clinical terms in that referral packet. And not because I don't want the nursing home to be, to know what's going, what your loved one needs, but because I've talked to a lot of family members who are right here with it, and they are tired and they're exhausted and they need to find a place for mom because she's up all night and she tries to leave the house. If you tell that to a nursing home, they're going to say, we don't have great staffing at night. This is a liability. We're not going to admit her because we can't meet her needs. So just stick with the referral packet from the nursing home, from the doctor's office, wherever. And then nursing homes will tell you we've got a 2-year waiting list. Well, so do daycares, but if you call, if you check in, you may experience a better wait than somebody who just calls all these facilities and doesn't follow up with them, because it's not an official list. There's no rules for how a nursing home has to take people from that list. So you may, especially if somebody's in the hospital, you may want to call to follow up with facilities more than once. However, Medicaid beds, nursing homes are kind of difficult to secure admission to, especially if you're going directly in on Medicaid. You can't be denied by a Medicaid facility because you're on Medicaid. You could be denied because there aren't available Medicaid beds, but you may have to consider widening that search to a greater physical area or to some of the facilities that you weren't as excited about. So just keep that in mind. Okay, the hospital, we talked about that. One nursing home to another, that's a whole thing. If a resident wants to move, the social services is required to help. The nursing home wants a resident to move regardless of the reason. They are responsible for securing new placement, and you can appeal that. You should contact us. We talked a little bit about guardianship. Just know that guardianship and power of attorney are not the same thing. If you're power of attorney for somebody, that does not mean you're a guardian. So try not to use those terms interchangeably because it'll get a lot of confusion. Admission contract, please read the contract. They are probably going to include this pre-dispute arbitration agreement. Try not to sign it. They can't require you to sign it, but most people are just signing. They may even say, oh, this is just an agreement. If anything happens, that we will work together to try to find a resolution. Try not to sign that. And then make sure you get a copy when you leave. Paying for the nursing home. This is the other big question that a lot of people have. There's Medicare, that's short-term stay. Don't forget, Medicare is really only going to pay for 20 days, 100%. And then days 21 through 100, there is a 20% copay. That is a lot of money. If you have a supplementary Medicare coverage, that may cover that, but they're only going to pay for that time. And then you either go home or you move to Medicaid. So there's a lot of misinformation about Medicaid. I can't get into all of this in the time that I have left, but please read through this. A home is not you don't have to sign your home over to the nursing home or over to the state. There are exemptions, especially if you have a spouse living in that home. If it's your primary residence as of 2022, as long as your equity in that home is less than $636,000, you can keep that. And financial resources. So a single resident gets to keep $2,000 in their bank account. If a spouse, a couple live in the nursing home, it's 4,000. But if one of the people lives in the nursing home and one lives back in their apartment or back in their home that they own together, they can keep up to 50% of their joint resources, but no less than $27,480. So if you have $50,000 in joint assets and you divide that by 2, that's less than 27,000. So you can keep that entire $50,000 up to $137,000. So if you have $270,000, you get to keep, the community spouse keeps that amount. Oh, and transfer look back periods, please don't make questionable transfers, because it will mean that Medicaid will say, we're not going to cover you until you've spent the value, the fair market value of the home that you transferred to your child. Until you pay all that to the nursing home, we're not going to cover you, which happens, and it's very terrible. There are a few exceptions: spouse, a child who's under 21, or a child who's disabled of any age, or if you lived with your mom for 2 years and you provided care and she avoided going into the nursing home, there's an exemption for that. I'm not a lawyer. Please check with a lawyer, but there are exceptions. This is just one of those big misinformation pieces that I try to make sure that I share with people. Income requirement: if you're above that income, you have to open a trust, put anything above that income in the trust, and then that money has to be used for your care. So if you need a jazzy scooter or a motorized wheelchair or something like that, you can use that qualified income trust to buy that. Patient liability: Medicaid, if they're going to pay for the nursing home for you and your income is below that limit, you keep $40 of that for your personal needs. It's a pittance, but nursing home residents on Medicaid are eligible for that phone with the free minutes and some other things to try to help, but it's really hard. These were just some examples of how Medicaid works to pay for the nursing home. I'm going to skip over those. Same with assets, just an example. And I don't mind, Terry, if you want to share this PowerPoint afterwards, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Ensuring quality care: federal regulations say that these facilities have to provide care to help somebody maintain where they were when they moved in, unless it was medically unavoidable, which is really, really hard. That's one of the things that we try to work on a lot. Care plans are one of the ways that you have a voice in, or your loved one has a voice in, what care they need. And it's basically an agreement with the resident in the facility on what the resident needs and how the facility will provide that care. They have to be developed within 48 hours of admission, but they really should be followed up afterwards. And then they have to be redone every 3 months, or if there's a change in the resident's condition. Get a copy of that. Get a copy of that when you leave so that you can follow up. An ombudsman can attend with you, but we just have to have the resident's consent. Ask for a copy at the end. If you want to learn more about other ways that you can advocate for a loved one, the Consumer Voice is an excellent resource. They've got all kinds of things specifically written for families to try to get good care, but also get to know us. Call, find out who the ombudsman is, learn what the resident rights are and how you can exercise them. That's the yellow book on our website, A Guide to Your Rights. This is an awesome document written by an attorney in Washington, D.C., 25 common problems and how to resolve them. It's free. Another one of those, you don't have to give your email. These are just a few examples. Eviction is a big one, those chemical restraints, and then, making somebody do something that's not their preference. How to find an ombudsman. You can also find them there, but you can go to our website to find an ombudsman in Kentucky. I'm the director, so I can help with anything that you might need. But if you have a complaint about a particular facility or you're looking for a nursing home in this area, Alice Salyers is our Bluegrass District Ombudsman. She's great. She's been with us. She started March 9th, 2020. She was baptized by fire with COVID, but she's an excellent advocate. She'd be a great person to talk to. And if you just want more information, visit our website. I really appreciate it, Terry. Assuming there are no other questions for me, I would like to pass it over to Kim.
All right. Thank you, Denise, for sharing your time and expertise. Great. Okay, Kim, take it away. How can we start a family council? And what is a family council at nursing homes?
Okay, so my mom, just for a little bit of history, My mom has lived in a memory care community, which is technically classified as a personal care home, since October of 2020. And during that time, of course, we had restrictions due to COVID, and I wasn't allowed in. Denise referred to some of the chemical restraints. Yeah, I learned about some of those being given to my mom without my knowledge sometime during the pandemic. So there were a lot of things that happened that concerned me. So, as fate and luck would have it, I ended up working with the Nursing Home Ombudsman Agency of the Bluegrass for a short-term project. And in that short time, I learned quite a bit about nursing homes, about personal care homes. And one of the things that I learned about was family councils. And that was not something that the facility talked to me about. That was just something that I had learned on my own. And what I did learn very quickly is that facilities that receive Medicare or Medicaid funding, if a family member expresses interest in starting a family council, they're really required to support that. They're required to provide you space for that meeting. They're required to have a person who's on staff who could be a liaison for the family council. They're really required to help you get that started if that's something you want. But in a personal care home, like where my mom resides, they're not required to support that. They can. And from my perspective, I started thinking about that, and I thought, well, if I were someone looking to place my parents in a memory care community, and I learned that that memory care community had a family council, that would probably affect the way I looked at that particular facility. Because the family council, so what happens with the family council? So when I would visit my mother in the memory care community, I would be visiting my mom. Sometimes I would see other family members visiting their loved ones, but we didn't really sit down and talk. We were there visiting our loved ones. That was our purpose for our visits. So when things started happening to my mom, I began to think, like, is she the only one experiencing these issues? Or is this something that is also happening to other residents in the facility? So the family council, as you can see from this is a general, like this is the flyer that I first developed, but I've made it general. And it's a Word document, and Terry will be sharing it with you afterward. You're welcome to take it and use it any way you'd like to. But so, what I really wanted to focus on in getting this family council started was this paragraph right here. A family council can play an important role in bringing forward concerns, requesting improvements, supporting new family members and residents, and supporting the facility staff to make care and life at ABC, the ABC Long-Term Care Community, the best it can be for our residents. So there's power in numbers. And when I would approach the administration with my concern for my mother, sometimes it would be listened to, sometimes it would just be dismissed, and a month later I might encounter the same problem. But when 6 or 7 or 8 of the families started coming together and talking about, well, this is also an issue for my loved one, well, then there's more power. And especially if we can start to suggest how the problem might be fixed. We all know our loved ones better than probably the facility staff. So we may have some ideas about how something could be improved for our loved ones, even though they're not living with us, they're living in the facility. So a couple of things that I do want to point out, because if you have a loved one who lives in a nursing home, a personal care home, or now an assisted living facility, you may be interested in starting a family council. because you don't have access to the information about the other families. So what I first had to do was I did go to the director of this particular community where my mother lives, and I talked to her about the possibility. This particular community has a personal care section, and then they have a memory care community. She told me that at one point they had a resident council for the personal care section, but they'd never had anything, either resident council. A resident council is the residents, just as it would imply. But for memory, individuals who have memory issues, they might not be the best representatives for themselves. So it was important to me to try to establish a family council. She was supportive of that. And she said that she would help me get the word out. So I was able to make up this flyer and, put that in places where people could pick it up. We initially set a first meeting date of February 1st. This flyer wasn't quite as detailed as what became by March 1st, because when I sat there on February 1st, I realized that the location information of the meeting had never been communicated to the families. So that was why nobody showed up. So instead of just throwing up my hands and saying, this is impossible, I said, okay, well, I'm going to try again at the 1st of next month. So I did. And at that meeting, we had 6 or 7 other families. And, it was a combination of people whose, loved ones were parents, whose loved ones were their spouses. And the first thing that we realized is that we could talk to each other in a way that we may not have been able to talk to, our friends outside, because we understood what each of us was going through. We understood the concerns of having a person who was living in this community, and we could, talk to each other in a way that I hadn't found another person who I could talk to. So that was really important for me personally. What we did was we ended up setting a regular meeting time. So we meet on the 3rd Thursday of each month at the same time at 6:30 to 7:30 in the chapel area at this particular facility. And what I do, I've kind of assumed the, administrator role, so to speak, for the family council. I send out an email reminder letting people know when it's coming up. And then if we do discuss something at the family council that I think is important that be communicated to the administration of the community, is, I'll put together an email with our concerns and send that to the director, and then make sure that also goes to the family council. I'm careful not to copy the names of the family council members when I send that to the director, because that's not really the director's concern. We can, if we want to invite a staff member to attend our family council, that's within our right, but it's also within our right to say, no, we don't want to have a staff member present, but we will communicate with a particular staff member. At this particular facility, they pretty much decided that communicating with the director would be the way to go. So it's an imperfect system, because it relies on people remembering to come together and to come to the meetings. And some months there's only one other person besides me who comes to the meeting. But what I've found is, and even just talking to that one person, as happened in our August meeting, we talked about things that were, concerning to both of us. It's her husband who's there, my mom. And we also found that, our residents interacted in ways that we each didn't know about, because she had seen things that I hadn't seen. I had seen things that she hadn't seen. And, as we left the meeting, she said, could I just give you a hug? And yes, she did. And, and there we hugged at the the entrance to the chapel. And, you know, the family council is really about trying to make things better for our residents. But I've found that, you know, as the daughter of a resident, it really helps me too. You know, and when I worked with the ombudsman program, you know, that was one of the things that, you know, I thought, wow, I wish we could encourage in every facility for people to think about starting family councils, because one of the things that happened to me when we first started having the family council and all these other family members came, all of a sudden I felt like I had permission to kind of interact more with their residents and pay attention more to their residents, because now I knew somebody who I could talk to about that. And, you know, one particular family member, I was there at a mealtime with my mom, and, you know, this woman's mother sat down near me and we had this really interesting conversation, and I reported that back to the daughter, and she was really happy to hear that, because sometimes when we go, especially with issues of dementia, sometimes what we as the family members see is not what other people get. And so to hear from other people, you know, how your loved one is still interacting with them, even if that's not the way she's interacting with you, it's priceless. You know, and really it makes a big difference. So for a lot of reasons, I really think that family councils are a great way to, you know, to be able to get a better idea of what's happening and to keep more eyes on people. And that's really, you know, and that's what the ombudsman does too. That's really what we have to do with long-term care, is we need more eyes on the residents who are living in long-term care communities. So thanks. I'm happy to answer any questions. You know, my email address on the flyer that I was showing you, my email address is included. So if any of you have specific questions about trying to start a family council at, you know, a facility that you have a loved one, I'd be happy to try to answer those questions and help you. So yeah, thanks. You're muted. Sure.
Darn, I do that all the time. Anyhow, I just wanted to thank both of you for sharing your time and your expertise with us. Does anybody have any extra questions? Feel free to reach out to them personally or to me. And again, we'll have the PowerPoints and we'll have the presentation recording on our website at the Elder Care website at UK. So have a good afternoon. Thank you everybody for attending.
Thank you all.
Thank you.